In this lesson, we're going to focus on Piaget's theory of cognitive development. So I'm sure you guys are saying, well, what the heck is cognitive development? Well, cognitive development is the study of how someone grows and develops over time, and it's based on Jean Piaget's work. And he focused a lot of his theories on childhood development. And he created some really interesting research that focuses on how they think and how they interact and how children see the world around them. And it doesn't exclude our adult patients, but what it does is it helps us to maybe understand them and gives us some insight into maybe how they developed, and it helps us to predict patterns and maybe how they might respond to care. And Piaget's work really focused on these 4 stages or periods, and that we're going to cover those in this lesson. So let's get started. The first period we're going to cover is something called sensorimotor development, and it starts from birth and goes all the way to age 2. And the important thing that you need to know about this is that it covers the development of reflexes over time. So this is really about things like motor skills. The other thing that's really interesting about this stage is that Piaget developed something called a circular reaction. And what a circular reaction is that's this something that the patient experiences, and then they try to replicate it. It was really foundational to Piaget's work. So an example of this would be like a child that gets their parents to laugh at something they do. And so what they try to do is replicate it. So they do it again and do it again and do it again and do it again until they start to figure it out, because we as humans are we're really pattern seeking. We're a pattern seeking species, and what we do is we try to find patterns. So Piaget really focused on this, and he said, hey, we're going to try to figure out these patterns. I'm realizing that infants and babies try to figure out these patterns, and so that's where this comes in. Sensorimotor development was really it's really complex, and it's can be really complicated, but the thing that you really need to understand is it's an early development in the way that babies and infants see the world, and it's how they start to explore, and they realize that things inside of it and how everything responds to them and to their actions. The next stage is the preoperational stage, and when we talk about the preoperational stage, what we're really talking about is the development from ages 2 to 7. And this stage is really broken up into the early and the late preoperational stage. And in the early preoperational stage, which is like ages 2 to 4, the patients really only see things from their point of view. They see this stage for like instant gratification, and this is why they call it maybe the terrible twos, because kids in this developmental stage really need things right then and there. And you'll see this increase in playing and pretending, and they'll use symbols or toys to represent other things. And this is kind of the stage where their imagination begins to go wild, and they really spend a lot of time playing. And they also lack concrete logic in this phase. But in the late preoperational stage, this is the time in their life they're going to start to ask, why this, why that, why? They really want to know everything, and it's really this is kind of the stage where they're going to start to develop primitive reasoning, and this is the ages 4 to 7. This is where they start to develop logical reasoning, but it's still very, very, very early. In the concrete operational stage, this is when you're going to see a lot more development in areas of logical reasoning. Most patients begin to use rationale, and this is where they start to critically think. Again, it's not anywhere near an adult's level of critical thinking, but this is where it starts to begin, and they can start to critically analyze things around them. They start to also see other people as independent objects, and then begin to see themselves in relation to those other people. You'll also start to see improvements in organization and classification during this stage. And they really start to use those processes and learn how and where they fit into society or their roles. And this stage is between ages 7 to 11. In this last stage, which is called the formal operational stage, This is like ages 11 to adulthood. And this is where the patient really begins to start using abstract thought. Patients become goal-oriented, meaning that they can see things like world peace, and they start to contemplate like the meaning of life. And I said, begin to experience his life. Those life experiences contribute to development, and higher level learning. It helps them to form more concrete reasoning and logic. For instance, like in earlier stages, they may use things like trial and error to figure out if things work and how they work. But in this stage, patients start to think about those processes more to be more efficient and to yield higher level results from whatever task they're doing. So because they develop such a higher level of thinking, and they use logic and abstract thought, they can really focus on being more efficient with their time, and they can be more on point with what they're trying to do. Just like with all of these other developmental theories, we have to think about our role as the nurse. And I could talk all day until I'm blue in the face about all these different types of theories and areas of development. But what you need to understand is that you need to have a good, solid foundation of some of these concepts, and especially with childhood development. This can really help guide you in anticipating what you're going to or what you're going to anticipate from your patient, what you're going to expect. For instance, if you have a toddler who has no concrete logical reasoning, you can't expect them to have things like abstract thought because they just have not gotten that far in developing. This helps you develop your education style. So this was really helpful in pediatrics. The other thing it does is it helps you cater to how you speak to patients and how you speak to patients' families when you're taking care of them. The other thing about Piaget's work is that he relates to Kohlberg, and it helps you understand Kohlberg's model of morality. Since Kohlberg used a lot of Piaget's developmental theories, it really helps you to meld what you learned and what you learned from Kohlberg, and how those two work together in terms of the theories and ideologies. And if you haven't checked out the lesson on Kohlberg, be sure to do that. What's really important about these theories is you can think about your patient as this multi-complex being that's not just some mannequin in a lab. All of your patients are going to have different levels of development. We have to keep those things in mind. So as you go forward, think about what you've done, and it'll help you to plan your care, and it also helps you to understand what you can anticipate for your patients. As we've gone through Piaget's theory of cognitive development, we've really focused our nursing concepts on human development, cognition, and health promotion. So let's recap. Piaget focused his work on childhood development. So be sure to refer back to this when you're working with your pediatric patients, or when you're moving forward and you're thinking about your adult patients. In the sensorimotor phase, your patients under the age of 2 will use tactile sensation and reactions to learn around the world around them. In the pre-operational stage, your patients are really going to focus on pretending and playing, and also they ask why, because they want to learn about everything. When you talk about the concrete operational stage, understand that your patient is going to begin using logical reasoning and to improve their organization. And finally, in the formal operational stage, this is where your patients are going to start to have abstract thought, and they're going to be goal-oriented, and they're really going to start to understand reasoning. And that's our lesson on Piaget and his theory of cognitive development. Make sure you check out all the resources attached to this lesson. Now go out and be your best selves today, and as always, happy nursing.